Hey guys, today I'm in the studio photographing Amelia, and I've got with me what I think is the absolute crown jewel in terms of lenses on the RF mount, and it's my favorite lens of all time too. It's the Canon RF 50mm 1.2. So let's shoot some portraits and talk about this lens, because I've got a lot to say about it. We'll talk about why I love it so much, why I think it's special, and why I'd like to see Canon make more lenses like this. First off, let's just get sharpness out of the way, because although this lens is stunningly sharp, its sharpness is actually far from its most interesting quality. Even wide open at f1.2 center frame, this lens is very, very sharp. Eyes and skin details are rendered with amazing clarity, and this makes head and shoulder portraits super detailed, and full-length shots really pop as well. This lens just has incredible colours and contrast even wide open at f1.2, and it gives us this without looking overly clinical like some other lenses. Step it down even only to f1.8 and it just gets better and better. Contrast and sharpness is just unbelievable from centre frame right to the very edges. I really love with this lens stepping it down to f2.8 or f4 and shooting headshots just for insanely detailed, beautiful portraits. So there we go, this lens is optically fantastic in terms of sharpness, but then again, so is pretty much every lens on RF mount. But what makes this RF 50mm 1.2 special, in my opinion, is its character. So let's talk bokeh first of all, because this lens has got some of the best bokeh that I've ever seen coming out of a prime lens. On this lens, there is a beautiful, smooth, gradual fall off between subject and the out of focus background that, in combination with that crazy good sharpness we were talking about and the contrast, makes every shot from this lens just pop. I especially love full-length portraits shot on this lens because your subject just jumps off the image thanks to that sharpness, contrast, and focus fall off. This lens masterfully and effortlessly tames busy, distracting backgrounds, but then a lot of primes can do that, of course, but the 50-1.2 can obliterate backgrounds, and the lack of any nervous bokeh and the smooth rendering of specular highlights can really turn backgrounds into painterly backdrops. You can get some really ethereal, magical looking images from this lens, and that makes it great for portraits, of course, but also for couple shots and weddings, absolutely. This lens really wows people when they see the final results. This lens by far gets me the most wows and the best reactions from models and couples when they see the shots on the back of the camera. Another thing that I love about the 50-1.2 is that this lens handles out of focus areas in the foreground really well. And this is sometimes a bit of a weak spot for fast primes, especially cheaper primes. I love to use out of focus elements in the foreground to frame subjects and add a bit of depth to an image, and this lens smooths out the details nicely. There is no nervous or harsh bokeh to be found here. It's also one of the few lenses that when you shoot it wide open at f1.2, it can give you a really beautiful swirling-like effect to the bokeh, which just melts the background into this creamy, artistic blur that makes the subject really stand out effortlessly. I mean, I could go on. The colors and skin tones, just general rendering from this lens are fantastic too. The colors are punchy and vibrant, and in my opinion, the skin tones are really flattering too. And all of that's without even mentioning just how versatile this lens is. The versatility of this lens, and really just the 50mm focal length in general, cannot be understated in my opinion, especially for photographing people. It's great for full-length portraits, like I said before, where that 1.2 aperture really helps give your shots a 3D look. But it just works so well for mid-length portraits too. That focus, fall off, and super smooth backgrounds really help put all of the focus on your subject. And I know that some of you will disagree with me, but in my opinion, 50mm is just starting to give you flattering headshots as well. Not like an 85, of course, but I still really like capturing headshots with this lens. Now I'm just going to take a quick second to let you guys know that the sponsor of today's video is Squarespace. As a photographer, having a website to showcase your work is a must, and Squarespace just makes it easy. There's no coding or design skills needed, just drag and drop and you are good to go. Squarespace's design intelligence blends expert design with AI, helping you create a personalized website and unique digital identity effortlessly. And of course, they also have the amazing customizable photo galleries that are perfect for showing off your portfolio. And if you need a store, Squarespace has all of the tools to set up a shop and handle many payment types seamlessly thanks to Squarespace Payments. So if you're ready to get started, head on over to squarespace.com/JamesReader and use code JamesReader for 10% off your first domain or website. There is something about this lens, and it goes beyond sharpness and specs. This lens has soul, and where other lenses are technically perfect, this one has got character, and it adds a signature look to images that can really help turn ordinary moments into something more. So let's talk about the imperfections, one of which is that it does lose quite a bit of contrast when you are shooting in backlit situations. And this can give a bit of a washed out look to images as we lose that contrast and the colors desaturate a little bit. And technically speaking, this is an imperfection. But in these images, I think that it totally adds to the charm, and the warm haze makes these golden hour portraits all the more dreamlike. Once you know that the lens has this quirk, well then it's just another tool in your arsenal that you can use. And it can really make things like couples portraits or wedding shots feel more romantic, warm and cozy. This lens is an absolute go-to for me when photographing couples or engagements or weddings for this very reason. This lens flares a lot in general too, and the flares can be pretty obtrusive. But again, I think the flares look great and actually make this lens pretty fun to use, because you can just throw on the lens hood and direct the lens away from the sun so that those flares reduce, or you can just completely lean into it. I love to embrace it when the shot calls for it and make it part of the image to add atmosphere, and this lens can also give you the most incredible circular flare. I can't actually always get it to do it, and it's totally over the top, and if you're not careful, it might ruin an image, but I love it. You can see in these example shots I took a few years ago, it's really apparent here. The lens also has a ton of vignette, especially wide open and uncorrected, but again, for me, this is really just another tool that I can use to leverage in portraits when composing somebody centrally. That darkening of the edges guides the viewer's eye towards our subjects, and there's plenty of times where I'll add a vignette in post anyway. But all of these quirks just add to the charm and character of this lens, in my opinion, and help it provide really organic and unique results in a world where, at this point, a lot of manufacturers, including Canon, on some of their newer releases are striving for optical perfection above all else. And some of that is definitely our fault as consumers, and I will hold myself extra accountable as a lens reviewer because I'm sure I contribute to this. We all obsess over sharpness, and I think as a result, manufacturers are giving us these sterile, perfect lenses, even if it means relying on digital corrections to achieve that. And we do need those lenses, of course, but I also want to see more lenses like this with imperfections and quirks and soul, because that's what gives an image personality at the end of the day. And actually, I think this lens proves that you can get all the sharpness that you would ever need while still avoiding that clinical sterile look. So it can be done. And now we have the RF 50mm 1.4 VCM prime. And this new prime kind of highlights some of the actual downsides of this lens, not the quirky optical imperfections, the actual reasons that you might want to consider avoiding this and picking up the new one. And a big one for sure is autofocus. And for portraits and my style of shooting, I've never had any complaints in regards to autofocus with the 50mm 1.2, but it is a little bit slow compared to the new lens. It's just not quite as snappy and accurate. The new lens just feels a bit more confident when focusing. The 50mm 1.2's front element also moves as it focuses, and it can be a little bit noisy compared to the completely silent 1.4 VCM. The new lens is also smaller and lighter, and it costs less too. Although I've never really found the size and weight of the 50 1.2 to be too much, but I can't deny that the new 1.4 lens is going to be nicer to use over a long day shooting weddings or events. You can check out my previous video comparing these two lenses in depth, but the gist is that generally the new lens is objectively better in several ways and is probably the more sensible buy for most people. But I can't help it. I just prefer the rendering of this 50mm 1.2 lens. One big obvious con with this lens is the price, and there's just no getting around the fact that this lens is expensive. I got mine used back in 2020 for £1,600, and the used price here in the UK actually still hovers around that mark, but brand new, this lens is going to cost you over £2,000. So there we go, that's my video on my favourite lens ever, the RF 50mm 1.2. And this year, I've actually owned this lens for 5 years. It was actually, I think, the second RF lens I ever bought, and is by far my most used lens. It's just one of those lenses that's going to really make your work stand out, whether you shoot fashion, sports, weddings, events, or portraits. If 50mm works for you, I highly recommend this lens. It has been by far one of the best investments that I have made since moving over to Canon's RF mount. And I would absolutely love to see Canon release a 35mm 1.2 in the same vein as this lens, aimed firmly at photographers, you know, just at stills shooters. We've got the 1.4 hybrid one, and hybrid lenses are amazing, especially for people like me who shoot a lot of photo and video. But the 50mm 1.2, similar to the 85 1.2 or even the 28-70 f2, those lenses feel like they were made with solely photographers in mind. And I'd love to see more of that from Canon, because I think that it's what they do best, making these lenses with more mojo and more character and more magic, even if it's at the expense of handling or sharpness, especially now that we've got such an incredible fleshed out range of hybrid lenses. But what do you guys think of the RF 50mm 1.2? Let me know down in the comments, and also let me know what your favorite lens of all time is. But that's everything for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.